Good. Okay. Man soul body relationship determines the degree of light or darkness in the world. This is a huge idea. Really is an amazing idea. We discussed man being built from body and soul last week. And now we are going, and the relationship between the two. And now he's going to talk about what's called Mida Keneged Mida, God's Hanhaga. He used the word Hanhaga. God's divine providence in the world is related to. Oh, sorry about that. Baruch Hashem, it's a good one. Honey, don't show the pictures from vacation. Yeah, that God relates to the world the same way, or corresponding to how man relates to his body. Rabbi, we've come to understanding man's composition and his condition in terms of both body and soul during the various time phases arranged and appointed for him. Now we need to understand how God's guidance of the world relates to man in all these time phases, how it relates to his body and how it relates to his soul. Okay, student, this is certainly a sensible thing. Rabbi, consider the fact that there are physical entities and spiritual entities. So before, the last paragraph, the last chapter was man and body and soul. And now he's going into physical entities and spiritual entities beyond man. And see the difference between them, very much like body and soul. The physical realm is undoubtedly lowly in comparison to the spiritual, which is by nature elevated and sublime. You can see how much of God's light there is in spiritual things and how much darkness and deficiency there is in physical things. We are therefore able to perceive two different creative processes at work. One process involves a strong influx of light and a powerful creative force, which gives rise to the spiritual realm, while the other one is a minimal influx of light and a weak creative force. Okay, so in the okay, so at the bottom of this, he calls these two forces, you can see number one, at the right at the bottom there, number one, the attribute of the concealment of God's presence through which he hides and conceals himself and does not reveal the majesty of his glory, and two, the attribute of revelation of his presence, meaning in Hebrew, great words, Hester Panim and Ha'arat Panim. So Hester, Seter is to be hidden, Panim is the face, so God's hidden face, or Ha'arat Panim, from the word or, from the word light, to enlighten, to be present and revealed. So whatever comes in, whatever is spiritual in the world and man's soul comes from what's called Ha'arat Panim, the revelation of his presence. Anything Gashmi, anything physical, comes from the attribute of Hester Panim. Okay. Now he says an interesting thing. Okay. Just as these two attributes are the foundation of the way God runs the world, so too they are the foundation, the type of beings he creates. So all coarse and unrefined creatures created only through concealment, exalted spiritual beings, however, created through a revelation of the light. So it's, you know, we are Yom V'Laila, we are used to this, right? We know this. That which is light is good, that which is dark is bad. The soul-body combination is based on the same two principles. And now he says something very interesting. Paragraph 2. Man himself is both the one who perfects and the one who becomes perfected. In his beautiful Hebrew, hu atzmo hametakein v'hanitkan. So man is the one. When it comes to man, man must overcome his body. That's what we learned last week. The soul should lead and elevate the physical, because he perfects himself through his task of serving God. That's the way that we do it. This is what our sages meant when they noted that the phrase, right, and it's talking about doing the mitzvot, va'asitem otam, you will do them. It's a play on words, va'asitem atem, you shall make yourselves, right? So the work of man is to make himself. Just something I want to add here, because he's mentioned it before about the tikkun that man does. So, if I go ahead and I volunteer at the soup kitchen, so I've done a good deed and I've improved society. There's someone that was suffering that is better off. That's for sure in this world. What about in the world to come? What about in terms of the, or you don't even have to look at it from the point of the world to come. Look at it at the point of view of development. Did I develop as a person by going to the soup kitchen? Certainly. I once again acted in a kind way. If my intentions were correct, I elevated that even more. I became elevated through that deed. The person that received the soup at the soup kitchen, is his soul elevated? Has his soul led his body and become more elevated? What would you say? Anyone?
No.
Right? No, he hasn't changed. He didn't develop as a person. He got soup. He's very happy. His body's happy, but he didn't do a mitzvah, right? He hasn't done a mitzvah. So, this is the.
But if he is aware that he's the recipient of a mitzvahdik act, he's aware of that. Doesn't that potentially change him? He sees good in the world from other people.
Maybe, yes. It could be. And it could be that he, according to that intention, will be that elevation. Meaning, if he, sometimes taking is giving. So, by allowing me to give him soup, he's becoming part of the act of me giving. But yeah, that's a pretty high level, and I'm not sure it's automatic as much as the mitzvah I'm doing would be for sure make an impression on my soul. So therefore, what he's saying over here is that man perfects and is the one to become perfected through man's own actions. And that is va'asitem otam. You should do them, do atem. You should make yourself, elevate yourself, self-elevation. Now, and that's what we spoke about last week. Man has ability to strengthen his physical side and his attachment to the physical. And if he's drawn after his physical, what he sees with his eyes and he feels in his heart, his soul, instead of helping the body by purifying it, becomes immersed in darkness, causing itself great loss and damage. If, on the other hand, he overcomes his negative drives and separates himself from the futilities of this world in order to go in the ways of the Torah and its mitzvahs, his soul will prevail over his body and succeed in purifying it. Okay, now we can better understand what is happening in the world and the difference between the earlier generations and the later generations. Okay. This is a concept. He doesn't actually give it its name over here, but it's well known as Yeridat Hadorot. Yeridat Hadorot means the going down of the generations, which means that as mankind advances, and he means it in the way we understand human development, right? Mankind has advanced tremendously industrially, technologically. But that's all in the physical realm, right? And even in terms of, let's say, the more, the disciplines of psychology, right? The advancements of science, by definition, are all in the physical realm. So the more man becomes physically engaged, the more he lives there, and that becomes his mindset, and I'm going to say conceptual framework. That's really what this is about. As the generations, right in the middle over here, he says, however, it is man himself who has ruined his ways and brought about the situation he finds himself in today.
Recording in progress.
Okay. Can you still hear me?
Yep. Yes.
Okay, good. So you're okay. I'm just gonna move on to my computer. Oh, there's my shared screen. Can I do that? It will be easier. We can ignore my wife's text with her friend. Let me see if I can do this quickly. Sorry. Part of the. It's a long time. Well.
What's it called in Hebrew? The moving down of the...
Okay, the two ways to pronounce it, either Ashkenazi or Sephardi, right? In the Ashkenazi world, they say Yeridas Hadoros, the Yeridat Hadorot, the going down of the generations. I want to just make this guy the host.
Basically saying, like, kids these days, and you shake your fist.
Right.
With their rock and roll music, and their hip gyrations and stuff like that.
Yes. So you have to be careful, because you sound very silly when you say, mankind is going backwards. But yes, in terms of, according to the Ramchal, over here, it's the ability to grasp and appreciate and live in the world of ruchniot, of spiritual, of the spiritual. Okay, so now let's see what page we're on. Okay, so that's this idea over here. Okay, and then at the top over here, he says something very interesting. Okay, sorry, let me just go back one page. Let's go down to over here, the cause of all of this. So the cause, a little bigger, the cause of all this is what I've already mentioned. God created the body by concealing his presence rather than through revealing the light of his presence. As a result, the body is dark and coarse. The soul, on the other hand, is created through the revelation of the revealing of his presence and through the attribute of pure goodness. As a result, it has eternal existence and totally pure. That's the soul. However, if man gives precedence to the body and puts it in charge, God responds measure for measure and hides his presence from him. So this is the huge idea. It's called Mida Keneged Mida. There are two ways to understand it. One way to understand it is measure for measure. So, all right, man, you want to become more physical? God says, fine, I will make the world more physical. The other way to understand it is that God made a world in which we get, generally speaking, we get what we want. I think the first way, even though it's more spiritual, is more correct, because he's really talking about how much light or darkness there is in the world, in the entire world, not just in man, right? So I'll give you an example. He doesn't give it in these chapters yet. He'll come to it later, but the Talmud says when the temple was destroyed, the taste of fruits was diminished. What does that mean? That means that the destruction of the temple was symbolic of God's presence leaving the world, right? When God's presence leaves the world, it's less good, right? It becomes more deficient. It becomes more lowly and physical as opposed to spiritual. Now, what he's saying over here is that to the degree that we, right? So there's a little, God world going on in the human, right? The neshama is like God, the body's like the world, right? But we're the driving force. So to the degree that we are able to influence ourselves and fix ourselves, God says, fine, beautiful. You're fixing yourself and bringing light into your darkness. I will bring light into my darkness, which is the world at large, right? So the world at large, that's these two systems, okay? So, and they mirror each other. So now let's see how he develops this. Okay, so first there was Adam, right? So we have to understand who is this man that we're talking about, because there are many men, right? Although I was speaking to a friend of mine in London today who has a Ukrainian housekeeper, and of course she's very worried about what was happening, but she found a hot water bottle on his bed, and she looked at him and said, "You're not a man." Yeah, who is the man? Yeah, a man would not use a hot water bottle, in the Ukrainian sense, right? Who's the man we're talking about, right? Stand up. So first, of course, it was Adam. It was the first man. But, so Adam's, and it's interesting that he sees their sin of eating from the tree of knowledge of good and bad, as since they are pulled after the illusion of their eyes and put the body in charge rather than the soul. God in turn concealed his presence from them. He told Adam in the beginning, by the sweat of your brow you shall eat bread. So before, apparently he didn't need to do that, right? It was much easier to work the land if he had to work the land at all. And from that day on, all of man's labors is for his mouth, yet he is never satisfied, right? We have to work. As a result of this, wisdom has been constantly decreasing and disappearing from mankind. Now, and here he talks about, because of that, the conceptual framework of people is low, is very physical, right? We're not able. It's interesting. I work with a group of people, Chai Mitzvah. We, those who did the Seret program. We know that the curriculum we made together with them. So we like to have the God conversation, and we discussed. I think in one of the questions in the books is, why is the God conversation a difficult conversation today? Right? You don't speak to people about God. It's not acceptable, right? So one of the reasons is because we have such difficulty in conceptualizing God and spiritual matters, right? We live in an extremely physical world, and I'm sure the fact that you guys are here means that you're already on the next level. But sometimes you meet people and they just can't grasp it. They're just too physical, right? They're too engrossed in the physical to be able to think about God, to think about life in a more meaningful way, and that's a result of becoming more engaged in the physical. Right? This first sentence. It is a fundamental principle that the thoughts and desires of a person are dictated by the limitations of his conscious mind, which means the things you're used to, you talk to, you. Okay, fine. Now, this wouldn't be so if man would cause his soul to rule over his body. God in turn would cause the light of his presence to be revealed to him. He would elevate him to such a high level that he would become like one of the most exalted type of angels. That's interesting. It sounds like, and I think it's something we touched on last week, besides fixing yourself, God rewards you personally, with more light, right? It's the way he said it last week was, you cause God's honor to be extended by overcoming the darkness, your own personal darkness. So God rewards you by sharing his glory with you. So that's, you get what's called siyata d'shmaya. You get this heavenly assistance that takes you all the way to the level of the angels, even greater than the ministering angels. This is what happened to the enlightened generation when they stood at the foot of Sinai, right? And this will happen again at the time of the final redemption, about which it is written, I will pour my spirit upon all people. So we can look forward to that. Now, the Jewish people and the world in general have actually been worthy of experiencing certain levels of this good at different time periods in history, some more, some less. Examples, the generation of Moshe. So even after the sin of the golden calf, we're on a very high level, apparently. The generation of King David and King Shlomo was on a very high level. And similarly, other generations were worthy of experiencing God's goodness. All of this was brought about by spiritual elevation they attained through the merit of their deeds, in which they caused the corresponding revelation of God's presence to them. So this is, knowing God's plan, this is a very important concept, right? Like God, it's a beautiful Nefesh HaChaim that says that the Jewish people are compared to Pharaoh's horses. What does that mean? So it says that Pharaoh's horses, ran into the sea. They dragged their riders into the sea. The riders might have been a little apprehensive. Well, that looks a little dangerous, but the horses went in. So the Rav Chaim of Volozhin says that means that God, who you think is the rider, is pulled by the horse, by the Jewish people. So God is responding, right? God, that's what happened with the exodus of Egypt, with the giving of the Torah, is God, and according to this, even from before, maybe there was something about the Jewish people at the giving of the Torah, but even from Adam, right? God responds to man. So man is really the kingpin of this world. Okay, and over here, right? If you would be able to trace how man, the relationship between man's body and soul and God's relationship to the world, you would find direct correlation. And you'd see the awesome wisdom of it. I understand this is something that's going to be revealed in the end of days. Okay, very good. Who would like to make a little summary of this important chapter? Oh, how did I lose a video? Okay, Gil, I saw you looking very anxious to do this.
Okay. No, that wasn't me, but sure. So the main idea he's talking about is the ability of man's sort of role that he can play in altering the world by kind of using the spiritual forces within to overcome the sort of lowly aspect of the body, sort of the mind, body, soul, or sort of the soul and the body, and then I don't know how much to rehash, but there's really sort of the definition really between these opposing forces. When God's presence is removed, that's what sort of rules the physical and material world that the body is sort of a prisoner to, and God's presence in the world, his active presence, is sort of akin to the spirit that's within us, the soul. And so to the extent that we can align ourselves with our own soul, we can bring his presence into the world and have a sort of a dynamic effect. And then, go through the sort of historical examples he talked about, sort of examples of this generationally in history. Trying to think, did I leave anything else out?
Yeah, it's just the idea of Yerida Tadorat, that the decline of the general decline of generations.
Right.
What was your understanding of that?
Well, I guess that the more people have become knowledgeable in the sciences, which is actually, it's pretty, if he was writing this in the early 1700s, that's like 150 years before the Industrial Revolution. So this was obviously after the Enlightenment, and it's during the Renaissance. So it's a period of flourishing of science and technology and art. So so his point is, is as people became more, as sort of these areas of material progress advanced, there is a corresponding lack of attention and achievement in the spiritual realm. and so God's presence becomes sort of less and less revealed because people are becoming more attached to what you could see as sort of the physical aspects or the body.
Is there a message in there that something might be wrong with technological industrial progress?
I mean, there is the potential. I think it's sort of, it's potential. It's fraught with sort of risk, but I can't imagine that. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily.
What would be the correct way of doing it?
Well, the correct way of doing it is to feed the soul and nurture the soul in addition to working on material progress, scientific progress, all kinds of progress. You can't neglect the need to also have spiritual development at the same time. It becomes more difficult. Becomes more difficult though.
You sound like a real Rosh Hashiva in Israel today.
Thanks. I don't think so.
This is the sad situation that we've arrived at, is that, we sent our young sheep to yeshiva after high school. And after a year, the message they told him was, you're doing great, but you're not ready to go back to college. You're going to be crushed. Right, the physical forces are too great. You're not ready to overcome them. And we actually thought it was a pretty negative education. We were like, instead of building him up and saying, "Wow, you've done so great," then this is how you should tackle those negative forces when they come. They were more like, you just sit here and learn Gemara more and kind of fill up your reservoir of light that you should be able to engage with them. So yeah, he doesn't discuss here how the correct way to do it, but of course there must be, right? It seems part of world history that we went this way. Although I don't know, had Adam not eaten from the fruit and had made it to the first Shabbat, would there be cell phones? Would there be Zoom? Like what would have happened with the material advancement in the world? Would there be any need for it?
He talks about you eating by the sweat of your brow, but as we become more technologically advanced, it requires less and less time to do the tasks that sort of satisfy the base needs of your body, right? I mean, you can get food much more easily. You can clothe yourself much more easily. You can do all those sorts of things. And so it's what do you choose to do with that time? You choose to use that time to bring about the light, the spiritual light in the world, and you choose to do mitzvahs, and I know it's a dastardly words to say here, but tikkun olam. Or do you choose to, watch YouTube videos about cats, or all the other sort of nonsense that you can get up to, eat gluttonously and
right,
buy things that you don't need, and destroy the environment and all that kind of stuff. So I don't see the technologies itself as a problem. It's like any tool. It's how you use the tool.
Jason, I like your comments, and elsewhere he writes in a different book about a concept that in Hebrew is called Prosciutt, and I don't really know what the right word to translate it is. Perhaps minimization or resignation from excess. And in this book also, he says several times, including in the chapter we just read, that the actions related to the current world, as opposed to the world to come, and related to the body and the material thing, is nonsense. In Hebrew, the word he uses is heaven, and in English it translates to nonsense. And in the other text that I read, where he talks about this concept of minimization, he says that the body is important and needs to be fed, it needs to be clothed, needs to be housed, needs to be protected. And so there is the expectation that we should do that. We should eat, modestly in a healthy way. And as you said, not gluttonously, because that is the excess that is just not appropriate. Because the reason for the body in the world, that in the current world, is to permit the soul to overcome it, to have man do mitzvot, to prepare for the world to come. So akin to that, I think that the development of science, insofar, something that's close to your and my heart, insofar as medicine, for example, to heal people, etc., there's nothing intrinsically excessive about that, for example. So that is a part of science, is okay, it's good. It's good to be a physician, it's good to heal people. It's good to potentially even gain knowledge about the physical world. That's all okay. But what I think that he thinks is not okay is not excess science per se, but rather gluttony of any kind. You're supposed to eat, but you're not supposed to overeat. You're supposed to have a house, but you're not supposed to have like a tremendously luxurious house. That there's no point to that. That only satisfies the base material. It does not, it's not, it goes beyond using the physical body as a vehicle for the development of the soul.
To tie that set of observations to Ramchal's own time, and I don't know if doing this diminishes or magnifies the Ramchal's work, but he was active at a time when the Renaissance, which harked back to Roman and Greek hallowing of the body and of the physical world and of the sciences as known at the time, were very much in opposition and believed in the Aristotelian idea that the world had existed forever. It was not created, it had existed forever. These are all antithetical to where he was coming from. And in a sense, I have a sense that he was reacting to that as a source of danger, overemphasizing the classical heritage at the cost of the spiritual heritage. In other words, it's Jerusalem versus, Athens versus Jerusalem. And I think he sensed this was a danger and a fatal attraction for Jews at the time. And he was in part reacting to that, I think.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for giving us that historical context, Eric. Very much might be that. I'm sure we could find out, actually.
Well, I've been reading Giambattista Vico, the guy.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
Yeah, and he was.
My
very
condolences. So.
He was
to do that in college, and oh my God.
Oh, really? No, he was very much aligned with the Ramchal. He was all about emphasizing spirituality and the need for religion, as opposed to where the Renaissance was leading people astray. Jason, did you really have to read him in college?
Yeah, it was a course in like the philosophy of kind of history. I don't even remember what it was like. We read him and philosophy of like civilizations.
Wow.
The him and like Arthur Toynbee and even Batutin and those kinds of things, talking about the rise and fall of civilizations and the reasons for it. But man, it was sort of impenetrable prose that he had there. So
Could be, but his big work was published in 1925. The New World or something was called, and Ramchal published this, I think, in what, 42 or 43 or something. So he was certainly
19
aware.
or 17?
Sorry,
You mean 17?
17. I'm sorry. Yeah, 17. So he was certainly aware of Vika's stuff, I think, Jason, which was very influential at the time, in opposition to Renaissance and, whatever. Again, I don't know if inserting this context diminishes Ramchal's achievement or not, but I think it, for me, helps clarify why he's emphasizing what he is. I don't know.
Jason, what was your
definitely
major in
adds.
college, if I may ask?
a history major.
Nice.
And then I got lost and went to med school. So that's
There's still hope you can find your way back, Jason.
Yeah.
Okay,
probably should.
Very good. I like that. I think that's a very good application of the concept, Ori, that, it's the excesses that we, you think about the technology of internet and, electronics. It allows us to do this. We can learn more, right? We can connect with more people around the world. But this has been used way more in the world for bad, right? It could be
Watching TikTok videos of cats, as Jason said. Yes. Right.
Alavai. That's actually Parev, right? There's Fleischiks out there, right?
Right.
It's
Right.
but it could, I don't know. I wonder if there's a point in what he's saying that almost by definition, developing these things and spending your day thinking about them, you get affected by them and you become a little more entrenched in this world. That would be the argument to say that none of this was necessary and Adam would have been fine in the Garden of Eden and, didn't need all these things. Listen, they didn't even have clothes before the sin, right? They were naked. That's a very important part of the Genesis narrative, that Adam and Eve were naked and were not embarrassed. And it was only after the sin that they needed clothes. So who knows? But yeah, the message for today is for sure that we need it, we use it, but we should not use it in an excessive way. I'm nervous to start the next bit. It's a very much more complicated chapter. It really goes back to the first three chapters heavily about God's relationship to the world. We're going to understand all that seeming repetition that he told us. Well, it's not really God. It's God. God in the eighth grade. Excuse me. God in the eighth grade classroom. Et cetera, et cetera. That all comes back to us here. An amazing point of showing how the way the soul relates to the body is the same way God relates to the world. So it's kind of the if this was the process, that God is responding in the same way, to me the next part is the anatomy of it. You'll see, wow, it's really like the soul and the body. But I think let's keep it till next week, because it is particularly quite complex, I found.
So given that we've all read it, should we try read the next chapter for next week or not?
Yeah, let's do that. I think
That'll finish out the section.
Yeah, that will
Maybe.
finish chapter 4, which I think is good. Yeah, fine. So for next week, we'll finish chapter 4 and that also forces me to be more specific about what we discuss and read in the class. Great. I just want to invite you all tomorrow night. I'm giving a class. I just thought come up here.
Yeah.
Let's see. We're all looking forward to the Yaffe Scholar tomorrow, Wednesday, via Zoom with Rabbi Bergman. This is a program at Beth Tefillah. So if any of you want to get back to your bad experience at Beth Tefillah, you come on the Zoom. You can interrupt me a lot. It will be great. I'll send the link.
Yeah. Okay.
As part of it's actually it's quite early, 7 till 8:15. The topic is the genius of Judaism, a civilization built on a text.
So it was the Yaffe scholars that you spoke to 3 years ago, I think, Rabbi, when I first heard you.
You told me that. Isn't that
It was the
amazing?
same. It's the same group.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah. And you did the beginning of Aseret with them, actually.
Yeah, so I hope this really charming South African guy comes up to me after the share again and
No
starts
way.
to
No way.
engage. We developed
No.
this wonderful friendship. We
No,
learn a lot
no,
together.
no.
We joke a lot together. He brings his kids into to drink the Kool-Aid. It's all good, I'm hoping for that.
A demonstration of Yeridat Hadorot. That's what it's about. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Good friends. Comments, questions? Lev, how you feeling?
Not too shabby. A little shabby, but not too shabby.
Good. All right. Have a wonderful evening, everyone, and looking forward.
You
Take
too.
care, everybody.
Buddy.
Okay.
Hey.
Bye. Hello. And video. Oh man.